Welcome to season 2. Gosh, it's been so long. Okay, so a lot's happened. We had the holidays. We had a big event. We had a very big event, but I'm going to talk about that in a second. Question of the day is, what do you think of my new studio set? And the reason I'm asking is because I have my own opinion, which I'll share with you in a second. But this is a new setup for the background and everything, and I was excited about it, and I want to see what you guys think. Kathleen is here with me. Hey, Kathleen. Good to see you here. There's several people over on YouTube that are lurking, so hopefully we can get them to comment. And let's see here. Okay, so like I said, I want to change my set every season, but I don't know if I'm liking this one. So I have 3 other choices for the background for the set, and I don't know. I couldn't choose between them. I was really excited about this one. I like the idea of it, but I don't know if I like it. I wanted to not have the, if you were here for season 1, you know that I had a plant, I had a bookcase, I had personal stuff on the bookcase, and I just didn't want to do all that, same stuff the second season. So I wanted to have something slightly different or completely different. So I bought one background that is slightly different, and I was going to move things around, but then I found this one. I don't know, I kind of like it. I like the idea of it, like I said, but I don't think I like it. I don't think it's personal enough, I thought it would be cool, but I don't think it's, I think it needs to be more personal. Kathleen's saying, it's okay, the last one's better. Yeah, the last one, of course, it's like when you move into a, you move furniture into a new room, you think you put it in the room the way you want it, and then, of course, you end up changing your mind shortly thereafter. So Susan's saying, it's interesting, what is it about that makes you hesitate? So I just answered that, but I just, it's nice and it's, different and it stands out, but I'm thinking that I need more of me here, So Sonia's agreeing with me. So I said I would change it out every season, but now I'm thinking that I might change it in the middle of a season. So I don't know. You'll have to see when you'll have to see if, I don't know. I'm torn. I'm definitely gonna change it before the end of this season, but I don't know how far into this season that I'll change it. So we'll see. Okay, so the other thing that happened while we were gone, we had Christmas, right? I know the timer's coming down, but we had Christmas, and then we had a very big event, which is the Super Bowl. And if you watched any of my previous shows from season 1, you will have seen me decked out in my Eagles gear because my team was doing really well. And of course, they went all the way this time and they won the Super Bowl. So I'm very excited. I have a shirt to show it. And of course, you have to get all the gear, right, when your team wins the Super Bowl. So I was amazed that we beat the Patriots. Sorry, Susan, she's a Patriots fan. But I am amazed. I'm so excited. And my husband's a Cowboys fan, which I've mentioned before. So poor Cowboys. They didn't do well at all this year. Okay, so timer's down. Let's go ahead and get this show started. Welcome to the Legal Tech Mastery Show. I'm Amy Bowser-Rollins, and today we're going to be talking about terminology that we use in the litigation support eDiscovery arena. So there's too many terms to choose from, so I just randomly chose 25 of them. And I'm hoping I can get through them pretty quickly. But I wanted to have this video created so that I could send people to it, because there's a lot of jargon, there's a lot of words that we've sort of made up over time in our industry, and there's others that we borrowed from other industries. And so I just wanted to go through them real quick in today's show. Okay, so let's see. Patty, good to see you here. And Sonia saying, glad the Eagles won. I always root for the underdog. I know, we were the underdog. And Jude is saying, go Pack, go. Let's see. Kimberly's saying, beautiful view. For composition purposes, you should offset the background so the corner is not directly behind your head. Interesting. That's the center of it, but that's an interesting. Do you have designer in you, Kimberly? Because I don't. Okay. Let's see. Susan's wishing congratulations. So let's see. YouTube. We got some people watching on YouTube but not commenting, so I'm hoping that you guys will start participating. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. I see Kimberly is having internet problems. Okay. I'm just checking to make sure that my stream is working fine. Okay. Just want to make sure it's not me, because we have been having internet issues in our house, and my husband was trying to fix it before he left today. So I just wanted to double check, make sure it's not me. It looks like it's feeding okay, so all right, so Wade's in the house. He always makes me laugh. And of course, he says, oh my God, what a beautiful view. He has a extreme sense of humor. So I don't know, Wade, if you missed the beginning of the conversation where we were talking about, I don't know if I like this studio background yet. So it's maybe it'll grow on me, but I don't know. I'm not liking it yet. Hey, Jenny, good to see you here. Marcy, good to see you on YouTube. Thanks for speaking up on YouTube. All right. And I see Karen's here too. Okay. Thanks for confirming, Sonia, that it's working for you. All right, let's get started. I got a lot to cover, 25 of them. So the first one is annotations and marginalia. So Rob saying nice shirt. See, Eagles, Super Bowl, yes. Annotations. It's a term that we use for a bunch of different things, so I wanted to show you what it is. And marginalia is a term that you don't know until you know. But it comes in to play when you're dealing with hard copy and you're scanning it and putting it into a database. Okay, so let's take a look at annotations first. So this is an example of 3 types of annotations. Okay, so this is when we have already loaded the documents into a database. We have usually we're annotating on top of the TIFF version, the image version, or the PDF version. So the one on the left is highlighting some text and adding a note so that the next person that comes along can see it. The one on the top right is an annotation also, but it's more of a marker, you know, where you can turn on a marker and write on it. And most of the tools have these features. And then also redaction. We all know what redaction is, but it's considered an annotation. You're making an annotation on top of the document, okay? Now, marginalia comes into play when you're scanning hard copies and there's handwriting in the margin of the document. So we stole this term from the general, population, where marginalia used to refer to writing in a book. Writing in the margins of a book. But when we came to the point of litigation where we started scanning hard copies so that we could put those images into a database, we had to steal that term or borrow that term to talk about the fact that there's handwriting on a document. So ideally, you want a copy of the document without the marginalia, but sometimes that's all you collect. And sometimes when you get to the point of trial, you're actually putting the, let me go back to me real quick. When you go back to trial, when you get to trial, you want a clean copy of the document, and then sometimes you're pointing out some marginalia. So that's the definition of marginalia. The next one is blowbacks. Karen says my heater looks real. We'll see if it grows on me. Wade is being funny again, and I like to give him credit when he's being funny because I think a sense of humor is important. That's why I love Wade. All right, blowbacks, that's a term that I like to teach newbies and also new lawyers, new litigators that land at the firm. We toss around, the paralegals and lit support toss around the term blowbacks. We stole it from the microfiche world, but in our world it means to print. So you have documents already loaded into the database in whatever format they are, and then you need hard copy to put into binders because litigators love their binders. So you send the documents, you export the documents, or you tell the vendor, you get them to somebody who's going to print them, and they can put them in the binders for you, or sometimes the paralegals just get it back and put the binders together themselves. So blowbacks is printed copies of the documents, okay? The next one is a coding panel, and I have layout there because one software provider decided to just call it something different. And but when I'm teaching, I say coding panel because that's a generic term across all software, as opposed to coding layout, which is something that Relativity came up with. Okay, so what is a coding panel? We rattle off these terms, like I said, and newbies don't, really know what they are. So this is an example of a coding panel. So we have the document that we're looking at in the database, and then on the right-hand side, usually it's on the right, although you can usually undock it and move it to the left if that's your preference. But it's going to be on the right-hand side most of the time, and it's just sections of criteria that we use to basically put the documents into buckets. We call it categorization. So we're categorizing the documents, and we're going to do something with those various buckets of documents, okay? Let's go back to me real quick. All right, Sonia's saying, our firm hates the word blowbacks. We call it image printing in-house. In-house meaning you're printing it in the firm. A lot of paralegals hang out in the copy room, putting binders together and printing. I feel bad for them. I wonder, Sonia, why do they hate it? That's a strong word. I used to tell my kids, hate's a strong word, but do they just don't like the term, like because it's too far? I mean, it's a legitimate term. Like I said, we borrowed it. Okay. So next we have, so we did coding panel. Next we have control number versus base number. And this is really hard for newbies to grasp in the beginning. Newbies and new paralegals. So I'm going to switch to my computer. So this is an article I wrote. Okay, sorry, comments distract me. This is an article I wrote a while back, which resonated with a bunch of people. And it's discussing the difference between a control number and a base number. And I'm not going to read it here, but I want to go down to this bottom part where I talk about what I've learned over time. So when you base number a document, you pick a prefix, a 2 to 3 letter, whatever, it doesn't matter. You pick a alpha prefix to put at the beginning of the number for productions. So things going out the door, you want to identify who's producing the documents. But what people started doing when we started having databases is they started applying the same methodology to put the documents in the database. They haven't produced them yet. They just collected them from their client. So they started adding prefixes. What happened was, over time, you realize by doing that, let's say that your client's name is, Microsoft, and you add a prefix of MS for your productions, okay? So you get documents from your client, and you're putting them into your database, and you're going to review them. You haven't produced anything yet, and some people will add the prefix MS to the document numbers in the database. Think about how confusing that is to differentiate between a document you collected and put in the database versus a document you produced, okay? So what I started doing over time is not adding a prefix at all. So for my control number, you have to have a number assigned to every document, every database record, okay? You have to have a number in order to A, refer to it, and B, link it to the files that go with the database record. So you might have native versions, and you might have images, you might have PDFs, whatever. You're looking at something, you're looking at the document in different viewers, and those viewers have to have that field that links them together. So we call it a control number, and it's just a matter of learning from experience how to name that control number, okay? So over time, I've learned to not do a prefix, but plenty of people still do prefix. And then I also learned over time that every time it was a scanned set of documents they were scanning, I just did HC. So, the law firms that I've worked in, everybody gets used to this methodology. Okay, so the next one we have is, it's funny, I have 2 mice here. So I have a mouse for my control system, and then I have a mouse for my, it's my Surface Pro that's showing you this. So I'm switching between the mice. This is interesting. I've done it before, but it's a little tricky. Okay, the next one is culling. So culling is at a basic level. Culling is just doing this right here, creating a subset from a larger data set. So when you collect a lot of documents from your client, you don't necessarily work with the whole set. You want to reduce the size of the document data sets that you're working with. That term is culling. So reducing the size of the document data set, okay? The next term is custodian, and we can come back to me for that. Custodian is, so in the eDiscovery world, we had to make up a term or assign a term to the fact that this is the person who we got the documents from, okay? So when we collect documents in a litigation matter, the custodian is the person that had the documents. So it's their email, or it's their, stuff on their hard drive, or it's, whatever we're collecting from them, hard copy or otherwise. Okay, let's see here. There's a delay in the comments, so the comments will be, depending on how fast I go. All right, let's see. We differentiate between scanned documents and electronic. ER for electronic review and R for scanned review. Okay. Yeah, so but at least you're coming up with a system that your, firm is used to. And so every time you hire another attorney or another paralegal, you just get them on board with what you're trying to do. So that's cool. The main thing is you're not using the same prefix that you would use to send out productions. All right, so for those of you on Facebook, Wade's over there saying get rid of my mice, because I have 2 mice right here, and get a dog instead. And then Patty, who's right near me, actually, in Maryland, I still call my paper files too. You know what? That's a good point. We definitely have to do that, so that's a good point. Okay, let's see. Custodian is the person who has the files that we're collecting, no matter what format the files are in, okay? The next term I want to go with is denist. So anytime you land in the eDiscovery world, you end up hearing this term in passing. If you're sending your client's documents that you've collected to a vendor or service provider, to get it into a database, they're going to do what's called process the data. But basically that means they're going to convert it from the format you collected it in to a format that works in a database. Okay, so one of those steps is to denist. So I wrote an article here on denisting. Oh, by the way, so I have a handout for today's show, and in the handout is a link to all this stuff that I'm going to, okay? So I'll add that link to the description on YouTube and Facebook after I'm done here. So this is the definition of what NIST stands for, and it's just basically a website that keeps track of all file types, and our service providers import that list or use that list, and then they grow their own as well. But basically they start with that list, and they basically keep track of all file types, and anything that's like here these are examples of files that won't make it into your database because they're considered system files. So denisting is taking out the files that really weren't made to be converted into a database, a document database, okay? That's denisting in a mouthful. All right, this one's fun. I said we like to make up names, so we've made up names and we've even confused ourselves with those names. Let's not go there yet. Let's go back to me. I do have an article on this, which I thought I would put up, but I decided I could just talk about it. So an email chain / string. Email thread is the one we're using nowadays more so than ever. That's the one that's in most software. But basically, if you send an email to someone and they reply, and then you reply back, and then somewhere along the way, one of you adds more people or subtracts people from the email, all those back and forthness, is that a word? All that back and forthness is email threads. So there's the parent email, and then there's the reply, and then there might be a reply, so you can picture it being indented. But in our world, we're always trying to find the entirety of the conversation through the email threads. And it's fun. I'm being sarcastic. It's not fun. Trying to take something that someone created called email and turn it into something that litigators can use easily. And nobody ever thought we were going to convert email into a database that litigators are going to use for production. So, okay, the next one is embedded objects. So let's go back over here and go here. So I wrote an article about embedded objects, and it's kind of hard to describe embedded objects. One of my favorite examples is, I'm going to scroll down here. So here's some examples I put in the article. A graphic inside a Word document. So for instance, letterhead. When you process the document to put it into a database, when you process the Word document or the PDF, that logo comes out as a separate file because it's embedded. So unfortunately, it becomes the next record in the database. Okay, so logo to email signatures, that's, anything in an email signature like a graphic or whatever is going to come out as it's an embedded object, so it's going to be extracted as a separate file. Now, this is my favorite example, the third one. So you collect a PowerPoint. In the PowerPoint, somebody's decided to put a snippet of an Excel workbook, okay? And nowadays, and for years and years now, Microsoft Office has what's called OLE, so Object Link Embedding. So you can easily, they made it really simple for users to take something from Excel, rubber band it, and come over here and paste it in PowerPoint. And then, you go about your business, you give your presentation, blah, blah, blah. Then we collect that PowerPoint. And what they don't realize is that the act of processing and pulling out embedded objects, we actually pull out the whole workbook, not just the snippet, but the whole workbook of the Excel file. So it's an issue, and it becomes a separate document in the database, and we have to decide whether to produce everything or just produce the PowerPoint as we collected it. So these are all, decisions we have to make. But the last one, the last example here, drives all of us nuts. Every link, every HTML link in an email gets extracted as an embedded object, and it comes out as a separate record. So sometimes we just find all of those LNK files, for instance, and just mark them as non-responsive. Sometimes we just throw them into the production. Everybody has their own way. Some people don't even, they tell the vendor, don't even give me embedded objects. I think that's a little scary to do. But some people do that. So there's no common denominator. There's no right or wrong. It's all personal preference, okay? All right, so the next one is exceptions. Have you figured out I'm doing them in alphabetical order yet? So let's see. Exceptions, so you've processed your data, and you're going to end up with things that don't land in the database. So you send your client's documents to the vendor processes them, and gives you back a database, okay? So these are examples of documents you're not going to get back in your database. Like I said, a system file, but even like an access database, you could have a password protected file. So what happens is they can't give it to you. The vendor can't put it into the database for you. So we have to do something about that. We have to alert everyone that those files are missing from the database. So we call them exceptions. So you should get, when you send data out and get a database back, you should get a Excel spreadsheet of all of the exceptions. If you don't, start asking for it. Okay, that's exceptions. False hits. This is interesting because you don't think about it until you actually try to search documents in a litigation case. So this is an example of, the attorney gives us a list of terms that they want to search in the database, and sometimes we have the vendor go ahead and do it, and sometimes we do it in-house. But here's an example of using the word bond, and bond means two different things. So if you just arbitrarily use the word bond as a keyword search term, then you could get back false hits or false positives, same difference, right? Because it is a hit, it's accurate, but it's not what you want, okay? So in this article, I talk about some workarounds you can do to try and avoid getting false hits. Okay, so the next one is family date. and family ID. And this is something that we made up over time because when you try to take documents, let's say that an email thread example, each of those threads could end up being separate documents in the database. But another example is if you, I'm going to scroll down here to where I have this really good example. You might have email attachment, email attachment, email attachment you collected, and they come out as 6 documents in the database, right? But you want to be able to sort. The first thing the attorneys do when they go to a database is sort by date, because everything in their mind is chronological. So they sort by date, and they can't keep the families together. They can't keep the documents together, the email attachment, the email attachment. So we implemented this 2-part other fields that we added for family ID to keep families together, and then we added the family date so that you could sort by the family date and get all the documents in date order based on the parent date. Okay, so this is just another thing that you need to learn when you get into the eDiscovery world, and this article is here if you've never done it. If you have a database but you haven't quite gotten to family dates and family IDs yet. Okay, so the next one is hash value. So you end up learning about deduplication, but then if you really want to learn what deduplication is, you learn about hash values. So hash values are, okay, it's easier just to give you this visual. So it's an alphanumeric value that identifies the uniqueness of a document or an email, a document family. Okay, so these are the methodologies of encryption that the hash values are. So we started out with MD5 hash, and we eventually went to SHA-1. So most of the time when we get the data processed, we ask the vendor to provide that hash value. Okay, so this article talks about what hashes are, how to use them, and then this is pretty cool. I have my students do this. If you click on this link, it'll take you to a site where you can just type in anything you want, and you'll see it building the hash as you're going along. So basically it builds something like this, you know, or whatever, whether you choose SHA-1 or MD5. But it, you know, visuals are good when you're teaching newbies. Okay, let's see. So the next one I have is import and export, and these are terms that we sort of throw around, us techies throw around, but a lot of newbies don't really understand what they are. So I'm gonna get a drink of water here for a second. I was just checking the comments. When you guys get quiet, I don't trust the technology. So, so the more you guys talk, the more I can know that the technology is working. Okay. You may be doing importing and exporting and not even realize that's what it's called. If you save an Excel spreadsheet to a CSV file, you just exported, sort of. And importing is pulling that CSV file into Excel. Those are imports and exports. But I want to show you, this is an example of what we call data mapping. So in a bunch of different software, they all have something similar to this. You, okay, Patty, thanks for letting me know. And come back, Patty, come back to the, let me put this on the screen so you can see what I'm talking about. Patty, just come back to the post in Facebook and it'll be there. Okay. All right, so importing. One very important thing about imports and exports is, let's see here. my mouse. Use the right mouse, Amy. Okay, see the part that says first row contains column names? We call that header row. That's very important when you're doing importing and exporting. But the data mapping is the thing down below. So you have a file that you need to import, and you need to map every field, every column in the import file to a field in the database, okay? So you do the same thing when you're exporting. You choose which fields you're going to export. But this is an import example, and this is an export example. So you're in the export functionality of this particular software, and I just randomly chose some software, so don't worry about what software it is. But you can see all the fields are on the left, and then you're getting ready to do an export, so you choose which fields you want to go into your export. Okay, so that's the basics of import and export. Okay, the next one is load files. And for that one, we're going to go back to my computer. All right, see how this is a bunch of gobbledygook? This is a delimited text file. It's a text file with fields of data in it, delimited by these ugly P paragraph thingies that, they're not paragraph, but they're ugly delimiters that concordance likes, and also because we're using relativity these days, they chose to use concordance delimiters as well. But anyways, this is an example of a load file, but basically it's just a bunch of text. Here's your header row at the top, which has a list of all your fields. And in this particular article, I'm talking about, I got a lot of, oh yeah, this is the one for TextPad. So if you were interested, if you go to this article, I encourage you to download the sample file right here. And then if you pull it into Notepad, see how it wraps? All of the data is wrapped, and you can't even tell where the beginning of a line is, so I've highlighted it for you. And so what I'm teaching here is if you pull it into TextPad, which is a text editor that we use a lot in our industry, you can see all the beginning and ending documents right here are lined up. Everything's lined up. Okay, so load files is another term that we use. All right, where are we? Loose docs. I wish somebody hadn't come up with loose docs. Actually, I'll cut back to me. And I got to cut back to Mimi. So much going on here. Okay, loose docs. Let's talk about this for a second. So I don't use the term loose docs, but a lot of people do. When I'm teaching, when you're collecting documents from a client, you're going to collect hard copy. You're going to collect documents on their hard drive. You're going to collect documents on their shared network drive, and you're going to collect email, right? So when you're talking about loose docs, and I wrote an article on this, which I linked to in the PDF handout, but basically anything that's email is email, and in my mind, everything else is non-email. That's how I teach it, so that it's very simple. Is it part of an email or not? And the reason I did that is because we use the term loose docs, and loose docs means Word, Excel, PDFs, anything that you found on the hard drive, right? Well, those are also called eDocs. Well, eDocs are also anything that's attached to an email. So you can have PowerPoint, Word, Excel attached to an email. Those are technically eDocs. They're technically email attachments, but they're part of email, okay? So when we're talking to the attorney and we're making decisions with the client about what we're going to put into the database, what we're going to produce from, a lot of times we start with email, and we assume that all those files, those loose files, those eDocs that were on the hard drives and the shared drive were probably attached to an email at one time, okay? So we start with email. A lot of times we do use the shared drive and local drive files, but I just email and non-email is my way of simplifying that and forget all the terminology that my colleagues have made up over the years. Okay? All right, the next one is, this is another one that confuses the heck out of newbies. And we have to have names for things because we started putting everything into databases, right? Okay, so we throw around this term called natives. All it means is the file as it was originally created in the application that the user used. You know, you're collecting these documents from your client. Someone at the client created the file. What software did they use? Doesn't matter. They created a file, right? That file has a file extension. So if you're collecting documents and you're putting those documents into your database as natives, and you're downloading them from the database as natives, that's what we're talking about, as they were originally created, okay? Then you have images. So we collect TIFF images as maybe a fax on someone's hard drive, or, you know, there's other things that end up being TIFFs that you collect. We also collect PDFs, and we also collect image files like JPEGs. We also convert documents to image format sometimes, and PDF format, so TIFF and PDF. So images are pictures, think of them as pictures of a document, and natives are the actual documents, okay? Alrighty. This one's fun. This one's a little bit more easier to understand, but you have to understand the difference when you're new to eDiscovery, okay? Let me make sure I'm... Oh yeah, okay. I remembered what I decided to show you guys, and this is pretty funny. So I explain this to my students a little bit differently, but for you guys, I decided just to use an image. So OCR text is text that was generated by software, okay? And OCR, we typically tell the attorneys that OCR text is not 100% accurate. And the reason is this example right here. I've never used this example, I just found it for you guys today, but in the classroom environment, I actually zoom in really close on a document and I wait till the characters are pixelated, and I describe the OCR process, because the OCR process goes down the page and shows, okay, see how the top example is the letters are touching each other? That's going to produce poor OCR text. The second example is showing how it's pixelating, and the third example is it's much clearer and none of the letters touch each other, okay? So the example of OCR text is the vendor will process all of your data, and for each document, they will get a corresponding text file, okay? And that text file gets imported into the database and allows you to search against the documents. If there's no text file, which is the definition of extracted text, if you can easily extract the text, like let's say an email or Word document, they can just take that text out, put it into a text field. It's called extracted text, and it's 100% accurate, give or take, but mostly 100%. But if there's no text file, they have to create one. So they run it through the document through an OCR process. It goes down the page, goes across the page, down the page, reads every character, and tries to form words, and it's not 100% accurate, okay? So that's the difference between OCR text. So if somebody's relying on the text to search, you should know that if this was a scanned document and we had to create OCR, that it's not going to be 100%. Sometimes the attorney will get on a high horse, show me the image of the document, and say, why can't I search for this word? There's the word right there. I can't search for this word. And I will say something like, you know, if I can tell right away, if the document's like blurry and turned at an angle, then it was a photocopy, right? It was at one point, and you know, documents can be photocopied 2 and 3 and 4 times, right? Okay, so OCR text is different from extracted text. All right, the next one is overlay. And Overlay is kind of hard to describe, but I do have one graphic. But let me explain it real quick. So an overlay is, and it's really powerful, because if you've already put your documents in the database, and let's say you have 25, 30 fields that go with each document, and then later you realize that you have some new information about those same documents, you can use an overlay process to add that new data to the existing documents. Okay, so this is an example of an overlay file that we can load in. All you need to do is have the first field be that control number that we talked about earlier. As long as it can find that control number, it can add any subsequent data to that record. So this is an example of just adding the title field. Okay? All right, so overlay is very powerful. You don't have to replace the documents, you can add new data. Okay. Next one is fun. Parents and children. So for this one, I wrote an article and I created some diagrams. So I talked about email threads earlier. Well, we talk about parents and children. So the parent email, and then the attachments to that email are children. And then if you scroll down here, you can actually have grandchildren. So you can have a parent email, you can have an email attached to an email, and in that email are attachments. So you can actually go down that far. This is what I talked about earlier with the family ID and the family date, trying to keep these families together. So I just want to let you know that we end up with attachment fields and parent fields. We add all these fields to the database in order to get to keep these documents together. Because like I said, nobody knew that we were going to be putting these into a database at some point. All right, the next one is placeholder. And this is kind of interesting because you really don't know about it until you know about it. So for placeholders, it relates mostly to productions. So if you are producing less than the entire family that you collected, then you're going to use placeholders. You might use a placeholder for the fact that it was a system file, so it was an exception and you can't produce it, so you add a placeholder. So let me show you a visual of the placeholders. And this is just, everybody has their own way of doing this. But an example on the right is we're giving you the actual native file and we're not giving you anything else. So when we produce it to you, we're going to produce the native, and so in the database we need something to sit there, so we use a placeholder called this is a native file. And the one on the left is if you're producing a family, let's say an email with 3 attachments, but one of the attachments is privileged and you're withholding it, then you might put a placeholder in for that. Okay, so that's that. Placeholders, who knew? All right, Pristine Set. This one's pretty easy to describe, and I actually make fun of it in my, let me show you this. I talk about how paralegals rock and how paralegals know to keep the pristine version, but in litigation support we also have to keep a pristine version. All it means is whatever you get in the door, this is my funny part right here, paralegals literally hold boxes hostage until they can get a photocopy set made. And in the electronic world, we will make copies of the data before we send it out the door to a vendor, for instance, or just make sure you're not sending your only copy out the door. Okay? Keep a pristine set. Keep a backup copy at all times. All right, so then we have PST. That's a term that you pretty much learn right away because we collect a lot of Outlook email. But in this article, I described what a PST is, and I also went into what an OST and an MSG and an EDB is. So This one you can come back to and read, but PST is basically a container of Outlook email. But if you're new to eDiscovery and we're tossing around the term PST, you're going to have to understand it. All right, so the next one is searching, and I have 3 examples for you. There's more, but I have these to start out with. So the first one is a full text search. So you should understand the differences between these. A lot of times people come to me to, in litigation support to help them search for stuff. And a lot of times it's because they don't understand these 3 principles right here. There's full text searching. This is a screenshot of using DT search, which is the search engine behind a lot of the software that we use. But full text is searching the text. Remember we talked about the OCR text and the extracted text? That's searching that text, okay? And then there's fielded searches. So fielded searches would be something like this, where there's fields of information. And in our world in eDiscovery, we have, all the metadata, all the fields of information about the documents that we could extract. So that's searching in fields, and sometimes you do a combination of full text and fields. And then there's proximity searching, and in this example, you'll see at the top where it says equal pay, work, and then a tilde or an approximate symbol, and then 10. And it's basically saying that I want to see all those terms within 10 words of each other. So equal pay. So proximity is within, a lot of times we're searching within 5 words, within 10 words of each other. Okay, the last term I have for you today is unitization. Whoops. I wanted to cut to me. Unitization, and I have an article on it, which will be in the PDF. But basically, I'll just explain it to you. If you, let's start with electronic. Have you ever received a PDF that's really, really large, and it's actually a bunch of different documents? Somebody decided that they would be helpful, or lazy, one of the two. Sometimes you have to unitize that large PDF into separate documents. Sometimes if there's bookmarks, it's easy to do in a PDF, but unitization also comes into play with hard copies. So when you collect hard copies, you need to be able to tell the vendor where do you want the doc breaks to be in the database. Database record is equal to a document. So where do the documents do you want everything in a file folder to be a document? Do you want paper clips to be a document, paper clip documents together? You have to tell the vendor how you want to unitize. And we usually do that with colored paper. We'll go into the documents and add colored sheets where we want the doc breaks to be. Okay, so we're at the end of the alphabet. We've finished all 25 terms. And so this is pretty cool that I have this now that I can refer people to. But I'm curious if you guys have any questions. You guys have been kind of quiet. Karen says she doesn't want to distract me, so thank you for that. Let's see. Wade, I know, and you're on my list. Definitely going to get you on here to talk about your Excel tool. All right, so this is a question. Is index search and DT search the same? I would say yes and no. So DT search is a name of software and it's a search engine, but an index search, the way I'm taking the question is you search against an index. So I have an article on that actually on my site about, and it was a recent article, but it just search, if you go to my site and search for index, I described everything about what indexes are and how they're created and different tools that we use to create those indexes. So hopefully that helps you. All right, so I'm going to let you guys go, and I will be back next Friday, and I have a guest. One of my longtime friends is coming on the show, so I'm really excited to have her here. I'm not going to tell you who it is yet, but she's pretty funny too, so I will add a link to the handout in the description as soon as I get done here, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks for coming on today, and I'll see you soon. Okay?